Okay, welcome. Welcome to Personalization Automation and the data tools you need. This is a super fun panelist webinar that we are excited about. We have with us Phil Davis from TowerData, Lars and Alessandra from GreenRope. And today we're going to be discussing all things personalization and automation, data and tools that you need. So first, let me do some intros. We have with us Phil, who is a data industry veteran, previously holding high-ranking positions at a number one of well-known players, including CEO of division of TowerData, president of the consumer base, and SVP HD of the online division of Equifax. At TowerData, Phil helps clients identify better, more effective ways to engage their prospects and customers. Welcome, Phil.
Thank you.
And we also have Lars, our CEO and founder of GreenRope. After a noteworthy history running successful email marketing focused CRMs for over a decade, Lars founded GreenRope in 2011, and with it has helped over 3,000 companies and nonprofits in over 40 countries. GreenRope brings together sales, marketing, and automation into a unified platform with the focus of working smarter, not harder. Lars is also an accomplished speaker and author, so make sure you pick up his book, CRM for Dummies, on Amazon today. And then finally, we also have Alessandra. She manages the day-to-day efforts of our marketing and implementation team as our marketing and implementation director. She specializes in strategy, content marketing, marketing pipeline management, lead nurturing, and marketing automation process. Her system and marketing expertise have helped hundreds of clients focus on building successful business models using GreenRope's all-in-one platform. So thank you guys so much for coming today. I'm so excited. So we're going to go through a bunch of questions for all of our attendees. If you have any questions, please use the Q&A box below, and we'll try to answer those kind of as we go along. So feel free to ask as we go. So first, guys, I want to ask, what is personalization?
Sure, I could start off here. So we've been thinking about personalization, at TowerData since I've joined long before. And really, when you think about personalization, I think from a marketing perspective, you're thinking about people-based marketing, right? And really, what is personalization feels like? It's the idea that we want our customers to have an experience with our brand that is similar across all channels, that would be unique to their specific needs. And it would be almost like as if back in the day when digital wasn't a thing, they came into your local store and you knew them, you felt comfortable with them, and you knew how to engage with them. So personalization can mean a few different things. From an email marketing perspective, it's all about creating engaging campaigns. And there's sort of this continuum, right? From the old give everyone one message, that's clearly not personalization, all the way to one-to-one. But there could be some notion of kind of segmenting that gets you towards personalization. As it relates to the overall customer journey, it's really about just connecting all the experiences, learning from experiences, understanding your customer, and reacting and responding so you can meet your customer where they are and at the right way with the right offers. So that's kind of how I would look at personalization.
Nice.
Yeah, and I think maybe, oh, sorry, do you want to?
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and I think to add to that, it's also personalization really helps in building trust with the customer and your leads, and creating that solid foundation for a long-term relationship. So if you're able to personalize at the beginning of the relationship, you automatically are going to have a lot more of an ability to build a strong rapport with that potential customer.
Yeah, I think it really comes down to the emotional connection that you have with your customer. And back in the early days of email, we all got those emails that were like, "Dear client," and then they got a little smarter, and then it said, "Dear Alessandra," or "Dear Phil." And so, that's sort of like the next level. But What we really want to do is make it so that when someone is interacting with our brand, they feel like they're being heard. And if we as an organization can listen to them and understand who it is and who they are and what they want, then we can create a more meaningful bond between us and the customer. And ultimately, that's what we want as businesses. We want to make our customers feel like we're taking good care of them. It's part of the value that we bring to our end users. So I think personalization is how we make someone feel like that relationship isn't like walking into just any other store where nobody knows your name, but like Phil mentioned, walking into the neighborhood store and having the reason why people like that is because there's that emotional connection that they have, that they feel like that company, that business that they walk into actually knows them and actually cares about what they want.
And I think that's even more so. I mean, I think it's even more important nowadays, especially going through the last year where so many people lost so much personal connection with people. They are going to look for brands that are making an effort to create more personalized experiences and develop those deeper connections.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple interesting points you both have brought up. The notion of like early in the relationship, Alessandra, that you kind of were alluding to, brands have gotten very good at this when it comes to their most loyal customers. They have a loyalty program, loyal customers share a lot, but how do you get someone to become that loyal customer? It's at those early interactions. And that's often where, from a personalization perspective, we see brands have a miss. And so, it's a lot of our conversation can be, how do you make those better early first impressions so that your customers recognize that you care about them out of the gate and that you can really help nurture that relationship. So I think that was kind of an interesting distinction you made early on.
Yeah, thank you.
So going kind of into what you were just talking about, Phil, why is personalization then so important?
So simply customers want it. Honestly, I think customers, I like it. I have a frequent flyer number with one of my airlines. When I call up, they have my phone number. They know my frequent flyer number. They should be able to match it to my phone number. And we've all had that experience when we're urgently calling in about a flight. We might not have all the information in front of us. And it's frustrating when they don't connect you to the experience and know that this is your flight, but you get that same message, that same scripted, customer service rep. And so those experiences feel bad. The experience feels much better when they say, "Oh, Mr. Davis, I see that from I see that you're traveling today. Are you calling about today? Is there a problem with today's flights?" And you cut through that garbage. And in a lot of ways, it's all about understanding and knowing your customers allows you to do that. So I think it's important because people want it.
Yeah, and I would go kind of repeat what I said in the beginning is that trust. I mean, know that if you have a personalized experience that you can trust that if you call into the airline or you call in for support somewhere that you're going to have an experience that's relevant to you and that you don't have to do, the whole merry-go-round to get what you need or to talk to the person that you need to talk to. I mean, I think that we've all been down that road a million times with trying to repeating ourselves over and over to, 10 different departments. And you're just finally like, okay, an hour later and nothing's done. And so I think that, in this day and age, we're all so busy. We want it, but we also expect it. And so I think it's becoming more important than ever. And if companies haven't started to personalize, which like Lars said, they are doing, like the hi Alessandra, but there's so much more that they can be doing to personalize the experience.
Right.
I think a lot of it comes down to that feeling. We've all heard the guy, that's been. I don't mean to overgeneralize my gender, but usually it's a guy that's standing in line and he's upset because the way he's being treated. And he says, "Don't you know who I am? I'm really important. I give you a lot of money." And I think at some point we've all been in that line with an organization or a company that's treated us maybe not as how we want to be treated. But to have that understanding that the company actually does know who you are. and they do care to make sure that you're happy. And I think that if you can convey that to your end users, to your clients, whether they're consuming a service or a product, where you can say that we do know who you are, we do know why you're important to us, then it conveys again that emotional connection that we have between our businesses and our customers. And that is what creates brand loyalty. That's what creates brand amplification, so that when people talk about you, they talk about you in a positive light.
Absolutely. And there's a notion of how it feels when you think about an email, right? An email, I recently booked a hiking trip through REI, and a couple of days later, I got a great email about items that would be useful that are on sale right now for that trip. And that's a really nice connection of the dots. And so I found that interesting. Conversely, I made a purchase recently, and since it was a bad experience, I'm not going to share the brand. And then shortly thereafter, really hours thereafter, I got an email offering me a discount on my next purchase, not recognizing I already made that purchase. So
that kind of ties in. Phil, you're just doing the stepping stones for me. What is the data that you need in order to be able to have that more personalized experience, like the one that you were just talking about with REI?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple things. It's really easy when someone makes a purchase, and you can look at the behavior and try to match what you ought to do based on that behavior. But you have to be careful there, because if you are only using some most recent behavior, you could get off on the wrong track, right? So you need to contextualize that behavior. So I would recommend that when you have a nugget of some behavior, you want to tie it back to their demographic and household information so that you could understand and contextualize the user, right? So as an example, I might go out and buy a birthday present for the 2-year-old that lives next door to me, and which I do, so we buy her gifts, and I'll get her a birthday present, but it doesn't mean that I want someone to take that behavior that I'm buying things for 2 years all the time. My children are adults, and I don't have grandchildren yet. So there isn't, what they can do is look at information about me, contextualize the experience, and make the right assumptions, and then get me into the right offer earlier on and not send me in the wrong direction. So, I think that's really one of the things in terms of the data you need. You want data about an individual, and you want the behavior data to contextualize the experience.
So
yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I was just going to ask Alessandra what you thought from a non-shopping perspective, what kind of data you need to really.
Well, so it was interesting. So we recently have been looking for a solution to help us solve a couple of strategies that we want to accomplish at GreenRope. And I was really shocked to find out that when I first was getting on these meetings with these salespeople, they would literally ask us, well, what CRM do you use? And I'm like, did you do any research whatsoever? It's not even, even if you don't, there's so many ways to find the information that you need, even in the very beginning stages where, let's say, you don't have necessarily in-depth data, but just data that it relates to who this person is on LinkedIn. I was so thrown off by that question, that I was like, well, this person obviously did no research. Do they really care about what we're doing in our business? And are they going to even understand what we need? And going to be able to provide a solution if they are literally asking me, well, what CRM and marketing automation system do I use? So, I think it starts just at the very basic level of just doing some basic research, and even, with everything that's available. And then if you look at, your top of funnel, of course, you're going to gather information from forms, and then you can do contact research and all of that stuff. But I mean, as the relationship continues through your funnel, then you get more of your behavioral data, what they click on, the kind of content they consume, if they're reading emails, if they're clicking on it, if they're, making phone calls. And then you have both that behavioral and more demographic data. And then I also think it's really important that salespeople in particular, when they are having, I mean, obviously with that first conversation, find out the basics, but just find out little things about that person to create a better connection. I mean, one of the guys that we ended up going with, I was on the meeting with one of our sales guys, and I mean, they had this great connection about this golf course that they had both been to. And so even little things like that really help personalize the experience and create the foundation for longevity in a relationship.
I think, and this is one of the things I talk to a lot of business owners about, where we often, as whether you're a manager or the owner or C-level or whatever, we often get pulled into the day-to-day stuff, the things that we have to do every day. And there's this old thing that goes all the way back to that E-Myth book, where you look at the difference between working on your business and working in your business. And it's one of those things that when we're doing our day-to-day things, we are often just sucked into the business of what do we have to do today. But the reality of understanding how to best interact with your customers and your leads really requires you to take a step back and not get sucked into that day-to-day and think about your customer journey. And this is a big part of what Alessandra does when she works with our customers with implementation. But we look at, what does the entire customer journey look like? So we have to sit back and take a minute and look at that journey and take a look at what are all the data points in that journey that we're going to have to use. So when we work on our business, that means that we're thinking about, how does someone find out about us? And then how do we follow up with them? And what sort of process do we take to nurture them through that buying journey? To know how we're going to treat someone differently, if we know that we're going to treat, say, various different genders differently, or if we're going to, or meaning the sense that the messaging would be different, or do we have different products available for people with different income levels or different industries? If there are things that we do different for each of these data points, we have to collect the data to know how to treat them differently. And so that's where we have to, as business owners, take that step back and think about, okay, and not just think about, but write down and use things like Journey Flow and some of the other tools, even if you're in front of a whiteboard, whatever it is, some way to plan the way somebody learns about you, goes through the buyer's journey, and then becomes a customer. And then we think past that to where they become advocates for our brand through that whole process. And this is what makes businesses special. This is what makes us different than everyone else, because we all have our own special sauce of how we create and we build our business models. The best way to do that is to take this high level view, think about how we're going to treat people differently. And Alessandra's example, where she was talking to one of our potential vendors, they should have known what industry we were in, because it defines what sort of products that they sell. But they didn't go through the exercise to do that. And so Alessandra got a negative experience because it wasn't properly personalized. So we may think that personalization also is sort of a bonus, but it can be a detriment if you don't do it right. If there is no personalization and someone asks the obvious question, and just like Phil, if the next time you got a mailer from whoever you purchased that from, and it was all about, whether it's an email product or a printed piece, that was all about, look at all the baby products we have for you. Yeah. That's when a business is out of touch. That's when you have to look at your customer journey and really analyze what sort of data do you really need to be able to do that personalization.
Yeah, that's a good point, because and we will probably talk about this, but it's also, you can collect so much data. Doesn't always necessarily mean you need to use all of it. Number one, you need to prioritize the data that's actually going to be important to your audience and your customers.
So then with that, how do you create a data structure, since we're talking about what you need and don't need, or will use and won't use? What's the best way to create a data structure?
So when we talk about the kind of the flexibility that we have in GreenRope, there are a lot of elements that go into the sales and marketing process. So a lot of times we think of custom fields as sort of like the basic way to do that. So, in GreenRope, we've got standard fields like every CRM where you'll have like a name, an address, an email address, whatever. And then you have as many custom fields or custom user fields as you want. And so those fields are mapped to individual contacts and they're mapped to individual companies. So depending on whether you sell to companies or contacts, how you want to store that data, whatever. So you have to understand, once you've gone through the exercise I was talking about before, about what data do you actually need to use in your buyer's journey, then you think about, all right, so if I need to know this, how do I create the structure? So usually that's user fields that are attached to contacts. But then we also have other things that we think about. So we have custom fields in opportunities, we have custom fields in support tickets, and then we also have custom objects. So these are all different ways that we can store different kinds of information and attach them to different things. So whether we're attaching them to a contact, attaching to a company, attaching those fields to a support ticket, or attaching those fields to an opportunity, all of those are elements of storing data that we're going to need to use as part of our sales and marketing customer service processes.
Yeah, and let's also not forget about demographic data too that can be stored within a contact record, because that's also incredibly valuable data. And then the only other thing I would add to that is also just creating a culture of a data forward culture within your organization, because if not everyone's on the same team with what data needs to be collected or stored or used, then you're going to be collecting it in all sorts of different ways and it becomes unmanageable, or you don't get the data you need and then you have to start over. And so really creating a mindset within the organization that this is the data we're collecting, this is how we're collecting it, and have everyone understand why we are collecting that data.
Yeah, and then I think what goes next is the notion that different departments will use different data. Mm-hmm. And it's very important to break down the silos between departments when it comes to the data. Data has to be shared across departments. And I find that becomes an interesting obstacle that a marketer might have with someone who's responsible for operations versus somebody who's in, product development. And so it's very important to understand and think about how you're sharing your data and contributing to the company's database, not a CRM here and other types of databases in other areas.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because that is exactly why GreenRope is what we do.
Yeah.
And it's also why we partnered with TowerData. Honestly, because we have TowerData's ability to do data appending built into our support ticketing forms and our sign-up forms, or the forms that you can put on your website. And having that data automatically accessible, so that you just have to turn it on and say, yes, I want to gather this data automatically. The GreenRope clients, you don't have to do anything to have that data pulled into your CRM automatically and then shared with your marketing team and your customer service team. So automatically we're pulling in really important data points like, what do we have? I think we have gender, we've got physical location, we've got homeowner status, income. These things that are really relevant to a lot of businesses, that if you're a business owner and you have access to that data, that helps you get a better understanding of who are these people that are filling out your forms.
Absolutely. And really what's nice is the heavy lifting that you've done. So, we have pretty simple to use APIs. Mm-hmm. However, you've already built the connection from our APIs so that your clients can hit a button and clean their emails and then add important elements. And so the 7 fields that are probably most popular amongst your customers are age, gender, location, marital status, presence of children, homeowner status, and income. Mm-hmm. You marry that with some of the behavioral data, you've got a lot of opportunities to really understand a user.
Right.
And can I just say one thing that Phil, you said that is so important and that everyone needs to do is clean their data. Make sure it is clean. Go through it. Do not just dump a bunch of data in and then wonder why, things are awry. It's, you have to clean your data.
Yeah. And that's why we focus on an email address, because in digital marketing, the hashed email, the email address sits at the center of the identity. And so if you don't want, you just don't want to have that wrong.
Right.
So we start there with an easy process, and you make it even easier for your customers to make certain that you have a deliverable and a hygiened email address.
I like that.
That's crazy. I love how you said it's the center of your identity. I'm sure happy that I changed my email from when I was in high school, like Scorpio Girl 87. That would be really serious. The center of my identity.
Yeah.
So
it is a running joke I have with my daughters who are now adults, is if you were forced to use your 12-year-old email address as your professional email, how well would that go? Now, for me, it is not a problem. I don't know if you're surprised, but I did not have a 12-year-old.
Well, yeah, when I was 12, I didn't have an email either, but I'm thinking about when I was in my 20s, I did, and that is probably even worse.
Mm-hmm.
So where do we get the data?
TowerData. Is it data? Do you say TowerData or TowerData?
We are okay with both.
Okay.
I like that.
Sort of like, process. We could go on both sides of the border and be very happy.
Right.
Yeah.
Tomato.
Yeah. I mean, but you get it more than just from TowerData. I mean, that's the thing, is in your database, you're going to have first-party data and then the opportunity for third-party data. So a lot of the gold sits right there at your fingertips. They're right from your website, and you should be capturing these signals properly and storing them in your CRM at GreenRope in the same way you have the opportunity to get the data from us. And so I think it's real important that when you think about it, you want to think about the richness of the first party data you have. And when you marry it with the third party data, you then bring in a level of understanding that is real important. And you're like, so
touching on first
about both those.
Touching on first and third party data is really important. There's been some technology that's changed in browsers recently to reject third party tracking data, third party cookies. And so I know we've talked about this a fair amount here in the GreenRope land, but if you haven't converted all of your tracking to first party tracking, meaning that you're using the same domain for your tracking cookies as that you actually have on your website, absolutely critical, because the browsers are all, I think pretty much the only one who's not is Chrome, because this is their whole business. But but Safari, Brave, Firefox, they're all stripping out third-party cookies, which makes it very difficult for you to track who's on your website without that. So if you still are using third-party cookies for tracking things, or third-party scripts or anything on your website, you're going to want to find ways to adjust that. If you're not sure how, if you're a GreenRope user, you can look it up on our help files or whatever. But basically, it's just changing out some of the scripts so that rather than using a GreenRope domain, you're using your own domain for those scripts, as it's very important for tracking that data as first-party data. TowerData provides the data as a third party, but that's all done offline, behind the scenes. That's us talking to them and doing the data appending. But like Phil was mentioning, we're combining demographic and behavioral data. So that behavioral data is absolutely critical to have, and making sure that you have that information in combination built into your CRM and your marketing automation. You want to get it all together in one place.
Yeah, absolutely. And we offer the solution without being dependent on the cookies. So that's also super important. When MarTech and AdTech kind of bleed into each other, you're going to find that the biggest sources of data are staying inside of these walled gardens. So they're stuck inside of Facebook, or stuck inside of Google, or they're staying inside of Amazon. And so Amazon could be very smart because of the scale they have. But for a retailer or anybody else to compete with Amazon, that's our mission, right? It's to help you get the data you need so you can be as smart or smarter than these walled gardens. So we want to bring you into the garden.
Yep.
And I want to add kind of like a whole different area of, where do you get the data? There are also ways, like for example, in GreenRope, and probably other systems have this as well. If you trigger a workflow and someone clicks on something, you can add or append data in a contact record. So that is another way that you can add or update data within the contact record, just from a behavioral item, actions, or, something that happens with the customer. So, of course, there's, cookies and all that out there, but there's also internal ways within a system to gather and update data as well.
Yeah, I think, Alessandra, it's like a mindset. So if you think about the customer journey, it's a two-way journey. If it's only you yelling at your customer, buy this, that's not exciting. If you make certain that you build in moments where you're listening to your clients, and it could be from signals that they click, and it could be from surveys they fill out, and it could be from a one question, were you satisfied? Yes, right?
Totally.
But building those opportunities to listen to your customer within the journey is part of that authentic relationship you're trying to build.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, the two go hand in hand, and it's just so cool that we're able to do that with all of these tools.
Absolutely.
So where do you store the data? We've kind of talked about that a little bit, but specifically, what are some of the online and offline data storing options that people have?
I think one of our obvious places is your CRM.
Right.
That's where all of this should live. And we obviously we have our mobile app, and we've got and you can back up your data. So there's all kinds of things you can do with online and offline storage, but it's the usage of it. So just being able to put it in a system is not enough. You need to be able to store it and access it. And Phil mentioned this earlier too, about having, if you have a form that gathers a piece of relevant information, maybe it is somebody's income. You want to have that available so that the people in both sales, marketing, and customer service, where it may be relevant, if it is relevant to those different departments, that they can access it and see that. So they can call up the contact record and see, we know this is a high value person, or a high value, that this may be in a separate category of person, or maybe it's not income. Maybe it's, some other thing. Maybe it's behavioral, whatever it is. If it's relevant, you want to make sure that it's easily accessible. One of the most common things I hear about is when people have different CRMs, and this is sort of in the traditional CRM space. You have the old school CRMs. I mean, like the Salesforce, the Microsoft, the Oracle, SAP, like these old, I hate to call them dinosaurs because they've been around a really long time, but their model is different because it was all focused on the CRM first. And then the marketing automation platform is kind of bolted on. And so sometimes companies will expect their salespeople to log into their CRM, and then they'll also want to log into this other marketing tool. And how many salespeople actually do that? They don't. So you need to be able to make this data accessible so that in real time, someone's using a single platform to get all the data that they need. And you're not asking someone, log into here, and then log into here to find out this about this person. And then log in over here to do this. People they don't want to do it. They just generally don't do it, which is why a lot of those more traditional CRMs have so much user friction, why so many users don't enjoy using them, because it makes their life harder. And we want to make it easier.
Yeah. I was just going to say, you got to make sure that people don't have to import and export out of systems, because you can do an export and guess what? 10 things could have changed in 25 seconds, from the list that you just exported, and then you import it in the system. So, it's so outdated by the time you even import it in, if you do a weekly, export import. So definitely single place for all of your data. Just like Phil said, got to break down those silos.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then how can you achieve personalization across the customer journey? I know we kind of touched on this a little bit early on, but let's kind of dive into it a little bit more.
So, I think it's about understanding your customer at all their touch points.
Mm-hmm.
It's meeting the customer where they are in a way they want to be met. From how it feels, I think we know how it feels as a customer, but it really is, it starts with like, understand as much as you can about the customer and as much as you can ingest about the customer, from the early experience when they're exploring all the way through.
Mm-hmm.
And then, recognizing your high value customers. I think that's part of the whole thing, is just that knowledge. Now, in terms of the how, there's a lot of fantastic tools that certainly Alessandra and Lars can speak to. So I'll let them speak to the tools.
But also, don't be creepy. There are so many I just have to say that too, because there are so many times where I get something where I'm like, are you where are you? This is weird. This is too intrusive. So understanding also when to use personalization and how to use that data. I mean, there's a lot of, you get a lot of triggers and so much information, but you also don't want to over intrude or overstep on a relationship that's not quite built yet. Because then, you go to get too personal, too quickly, then the person's like, whoa, how do you know all this? This is a little weird. I mean, at least for me, you got to kind of build that trust and build that relationship without just being like, like, oh, we know that you live in, on this street. You're like, okay, this is too much, so it's just understanding when to use the data for the appropriate amount of personalization.
Well, and one of the biggest errors that a brand makes is around frequency as it relates to retargeting. And, so you go to their site and you get retargeted 47 times in the next hour everywhere you are.
It's crazy.
So it's about managing the frequency too. It's really important. And, we, as email marketers, we're very good at managing frequency. We learned over the years to have daily, weekly, monthly caps, perhaps. And as a multi-channel, marketer, you have to think about frequency across all your touch points. That's part of the journey. Yeah. And then you could really creep somebody out.
Well, our attendee, Steve Debris, is concerned, Alessandra, that you might have a stalker. He says stalker.
No, I just am on so many websites all the time. I mean, whether it's either personal shopping or just like doing research for.
It can be. It's very intrusive. We have the Alexa, and I feel like every time I talk to in my family, and then I get on my computer, suddenly whatever I was talking about is now being suggested to me. So it's definitely there's a lot of outside sources listening in.
There are also some legal things to be considered, especially with respect to GDPR. Mm-hmm. One of the parts of GDPR is something called data minimization or minimalization. I don't know what the right exact word is there, but the idea behind it is that you don't want to necessarily just gather all the data you can and store it about everyone just because you can. And part of that is it comes down to exactly like what you were talking about, the stalker effect. You want to gather the data that's relevant to supporting your customer across and through the customer journey. So you should think about what information do you need as you go through, and not just gather absolutely everything because you possibly can. One, because there is such a thing. I mean, it's good to have a lot of information about somebody, but if you have a lot of extra information that creates noise in your data, then that's not necessarily going to help you. And so there's a balance to be made here between gathering as much information that's useful and relevant, and not just gathering a ton of information so you can say, oh, I know, some random esoteric kind of piece of information that you would never use. And I can't really think of something like that off the top of my head, but I'm sure we've all had the opportunity to gather information and just hold on to it just for the sake of holding on to it, as opposed to thinking about how can we actually apply this to really helping our customer and communicating with them.
Right.
Absolutely. And we want to do, I think that our customers, we talk about safely tailoring experiences to meet their needs. And I think having the word safely in front is important. So not just too many fields, Lars, it's also the notion of when you normalize the data into it's the field segments, like it's the ranges. How many ranges do you really need versus, you take age, you could normalize age a lot of ways. You could normalize it as a age number. You could normalize it as an age range. You could normalize it as a month that of their birthday. You could normalize it to an exact birthday. If you do exact birthday, the problem is that's also a field that people often use with their banking relationships and other relationships. So do I really want to store exact birthday if I really don't need it, right? Because that's a field that you probably don't need. So we think about how we normalize the data in ways that protect our consumers and also give us what we're looking for. So can I live with 5-year age range, or do I want month without their age so I could recognize their birthday month, And so you want to think through those things also.
You could just say young, because that would just describe all of us.
Exactly.
And then what are some of the tools to create a successful plan and execute and optimize personalization across the customer journey? So what are some of the tools to successfully plan, execute, and optimize personalization across the customer journey? I know we talked about this earlier too.
I think we should invent that new word, optimizate.
I know.
Absolutely.
We were super crazy this morning when we were reviewing these slides. Just keeping everybody on their toes.
So, what's interesting? I think that a lot of teams, so here's my recommendation to marketers always, is you spend a lot of energy picking out your ESP, in this case, GreenRope, and you spend money, you invest. And often in your day-to-day, you only use a fraction of the tool.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe the most important tool beyond the actual tool is actually your customer rep that you can go to get smarter, better, broader on all the tools. And so I think one of the most important relationships and tools that you have is that partnership with somebody at your ESP. And you want to take those regular meetings so you can learn more about what you can do. And if you have an initiative, you shouldn't be shy about saying, how do I best, launch something? So I actually, when I think about, it's not even the tool that becomes the most important tool. It's the individual and the relationship that can make that tool that big tool more powerful.
Mm-hmm.
And also strategy and planning. I mean, do not, you gotta spend time thinking about it. I have so many people that are like, oh, well, I want to do lead nurturing. Okay, well, what does that mean to you?
Right.
So does it mean, and are you, if you've got 3 different products, are you, segmenting the people who are with their interest in the product? I mean, what does it come down to? It's not just like, oh, I want to do this. It's like, okay, planning and strategizing. I mean, that's one of the biggest, I think, things that people miss sometimes when building stuff out. They're just like, okay, look, I can put emails here, I can put emails here, and I can do this. But if you don't think about the process, then you're going to spend so much time going back, reviewing, revising, all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, there are tools that are made for planning. Things like we offer Journey Flow as a free tool. All you got to do is log in with LinkedIn, and you just go to journeyflow.com or download the app, and it's a customer journey mapping system. And there are plenty of other products like that on the market. It can be a whiteboard as a tool for planning. But also, Phil, I mean, you touched on a really important point about the relationship with your software vendors being a good way to figure out how to do this. I know personally, our company has helped hundreds of businesses with this process. And, I think there's a temptation for us to always want to reinvent the wheel and come through and say, well, I want to start from scratch and I want to build this exactly how I want. And then they realize that there may have been some lessons that they could have learned by using some of the experiences that other people can bring to the table and help you think through some of those problems. And, like Phil was saying, especially with email, there's sort of this temptation to say, oh, I've got this great idea. I want to send them a drip campaign, one a day for the next 30 days in a row. And a lot of people don't really want that much email. I mean, they have to really love you to have that kind of email traffic from you filling up their inbox. So a lot of that comes down to, well, if we want to do this, how do we make sure that we present the right information at the right times and leverage a lot of the experiences? And that's why we have an implementation team, why Alessandra she manages a team of people that can help people, think through all this, the planning and the setup and everything of all the journeys, the automation and everything. But it all comes as part of a bigger system. And so you
Right.
leverage the tools that you have. And, one of the tools that you have as a customer of GreenRope is we've got an extensive help file. We've got a lot of information available to you. And the tools that are for personalization, a lot of them are automated. So you can run those, when you hit the research contact button, when you're looking at a contact, that goes out to TowerData and it will find information that we store there. We also use full contact as another one, but it integrates that data and pulls it automatically into the contact record. So these are tools that you can use at your disposal. Some of them are software, some of them are people, but they're all there to support you. And that's the most important thing, is to feel the support from the tools that you have to know that you can accomplish what you want to accomplish.
So with that, what do you think is going to be, or what has been new in 2021, what's still to come in the rest of 2021? And then what are your individual 2 to 3 year personalization trend predictions? I'd like to see what you all think.
So I think in 2021, we've seen a lot of change over the last year in customer behavior, and we've seen a lot of change in the way we also work. We've become a more distributed workforce, right? So there are less people in an office. I think the three of you might be actually in 3 different states.
Yeah, we are.
As an example. And so that's one thing that's happening. At the same time, from a database, companies are doing a better job of getting all their data into a centralized CRM. And so when you think about data, we're going to use our marketing automation engine and our CRM to solve more problems and more opportunities than just what we do with our customer. Think in a distributed workforce, we're also going to start to do a better job of building out workflows that help marketing teams be better organized and coordinated, help people in finance get the information that they need. I think that we'll see better coordinated workflows that solve broader business problems beyond what happens inside the CRM, and allows us to communicate with each other in a better way as the workforce becomes more distributed.
I agree with that.
Yeah, I think the distribution of, obviously the pandemic had a huge impact on the way that people do things. It was one of the reasons why we built our native Zoom integration, so that you can host a webinar or host a GoToMeeting, automatically pull the attendee data into the CRM, automatically do the data appending with TowerData, and then feed those contacts through a journey where you can do marketing automation. You can ask them for more information. You can send them follow-up messages, but you can automate that entire process. So I think the combination of the way people work differently this year and how that's changed as a result of the pandemic, and exactly what Phil was saying in terms of having access to tools that pull all these pieces together. Now with a single GreenRope account, all you need is a Zoom account, and you can just automatically pull these attendees, these registrants in, go through all the marketing automation systems that you would ever possibly want to set up, multi-channel, whether you're doing social, whether you're doing SMS or phone or email or whatever. Having all of that information pulled together and automated means that as companies, we can run more efficiently. Because if we can set up these processes to do the things that are automatic, then we don't have to have people on staff that are doing that. And the idea is not to replace the people on your staff, it's to make them do the things that people are better at. So what do people do that's really special is they interact with other people. They can be creative. They do the things that are more human-like. And we have software and machines and tools to do the things that are more automated. And so we have to know what those things are, plan for them, build the personalization around them. We don't replace people just with machines because we can, because then the end user experience can suffer. So we just think about what that whole process looks like, and then we make sure that we use tools like GreenRope. Obviously, we're biased because this is a GreenRope webinar, but the idea of using the tools that are at your disposal to automate the way you do business so that you can run more efficiently, which helps you scale.
Yeah, I like that. I would say that my prediction and stuff that I'm seeing is as people become more comfortable with automation and how they're, kind of putting all their pieces together, and, really digitally transforming their businesses, they're going to start getting more creative with their online and their offline efforts. So getting creative with their customer journey in terms of like the human to human interactions, but also the automated interactions, and building those into a more fluid customer journey. I think that that's definitely something that people are really going to be working on and working toward in the next couple of years.
Yeah, and to build on that, I think the in-store experience isn't going to go away, but I believe that more in-store experience will involve logging in when you go in-store into an app that allows who's ever taking care of you to even have more data at their fingertips. So they automatically know what size is. If you're buying clothes, you log in, and the notion of the last time you bought a pair, this is the exact size you bought, will make the in-store and the online experience, that profile you have, more usable across all channels.
Phil, you're reminding me I got to start working out again.
There you go.
They remember my size. They'll say, you're getting bigger.
Was your online not match your in-store?
Well, maybe you can put your Fitbit API tied to their app, and then they can get your next size.
Right.
I mean, I think, who's done an amazing job with all of that is, Peloton. They have done such a good job. And I recently got a Peloton, so I'm all about it. I'm like one of those memes that it's like, tell me about your Peloton. But they do, they've got an app where you can do all of their exercises and do a bunch of stuff without actually having a Peloton to engage people. But then you end up that's how I started. And then I was like, I want one. And then I got one because I was so engaged with all the stuff they were offering on their app, with their kind of without the bike itself. They've really killed it during this whole thing. Good example.
Yep.
For personalization, like every time you log in, they're like, you should take this class, and it's great. And also another thing I want to say is also don't be scared with personalization. Like get creative and go, don't be afraid to try new things with personalization. And also everyone makes mistakes. Facebook made a freaking huge mistake the other day when they sent out an email about one of their webinars. They tried to do a placeholder that was to the first name, but someone messed up their placeholder, and literally it was just this long string of characters that was a placeholder in their email subject line. So, get creative, but also mistakes happen, and we're all trying new things, but there's a lot of tools out there to help you get it right.
Make sure you test.
Exactly. That's what I was just thinking, Lars.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you guys so much. We haven't had any questions come in, so if anybody has any questions, that would be great. We did have a couple of comments. Steve said that I know many of my customers, and personalization means referencing a recent conversation, event, or something that it excluded. They know it is generated by technology and not by my fingers typing the email. I want to be authentic with them. That is my ongoing personal struggle with automation.
I think the thing that Steve is touching on is important. You know, you want to be careful not to do too much overt, like, I know that you are between the age of 40 and 49. Things like that. It has to do with how you brand your messaging, but also
Right.
doing things like in GreenRope, we have dynamic data when you do merging. So dynamic data, it allows you to set up these rules. So you could say, if someone's age is, for example, between 30 and 50, then maybe put this particular article there that doesn't necessarily call out that you know their age or their exact range or whatever, because you may know their age down to the year, but you don't want to say, I know that as a 39-year-old you're interested in X, because that's where you can kind of creep people out. But if you say, I know that, you know, or if you just put an article in there that's more relevant to people in that particular age range, you're able to create that personalized message without it calling out the information that you know about them in a creepy way.
Right.
Yeah. I think Steve, the other thing, it was Steve, I believe, right?
Yeah.
So I think the other opportunity is to use data to impact the images in the email. And I would take an example, hypothetical example, but you get an email from Peloton trying to suggest you should buy the bike. You know, for some people, an age appropriate person image makes more sense. You know,
100%.
show me a 21-year-old on a bike ripped. I'm like, they're 21. Everybody looks great when they're 21. But get an age appropriate who speaks to me, and just the image else could be the same. It's not creepy, it's comfortable, but it's just using imagery to help tell your story and engage with your customer.
I love that. That's such good advice, and like in such an easy way, you know, like with dynamic placeholders to immediately engage and connect with you know, and that can be used in, you know, any industry. I mean, you can do so, you know, and it's even how you talk to people, like how we talk to people about GreenRope. I mean, we definitely have people that are much more technical. And so you want to have more of that technical messaging, where then you have some people who are much more new to this. So you have a completely different way of how you engage and interact with those people without overwhelming them. I mean, it can be used in, both imagery and messaging in any industry. You can easily find ways to personalize and segment it without being and also without it being like crazy effort on your part, because, you know, as Lars was saying, the dynamic placeholders, that's the easiest way to do it. It's automatic.
That's what I love about the images. It's one of the easiest execution of, you know, you think about personas and then what images are appropriate for those personas, and it's one of the easiest lifts you can get.
Thank you guys so much for joining today, for coming on for this discussion. I think it was really insightful and helpful to a lot of our clients that are sitting in right now and that will view it later online, because we will publish it. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Phil.
Thank you, Phil, so much.
Thanks.
Steve says it was great to see you. Thank you.